Humankind is perhaps the first major new game in the 4X genre to really compete with the Civilization series. Civilization has basically held a near monopoly among historical explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate type strategy games for decades. In my humble opinion, this has been to its detriment. Much like any near or actual monopolies in the gaming space, it breeds stagnation and discourages innovation, and even though Civilization 6 is a good game, I personally wish it was so much more. Lucky for me then that Humankind is here, a game which on the surface is almost identical to Civilization in every main aspect, but which promises to change and improve where the games before it has failed. The question remains then, is Humankind anything more than a Civilization clone? And if so, what does this newcomer bring to the table? Hey there friends, my name is Andy, and today we're taking a deep dive into Humankind and why it is indeed such an exciting game. And if that sounds good to you, I hope you'll leave a like and a comment below. And now, Humankind. Humankind is a lot of things. And if you're acquainted with the Civilization series, I'd say much of your experience will transfer really well over. There's a campaign map where you found cities and erect buildings, you move troops around, and develop your society based on certain parameters, demanding that you have accumulated enough relevant resource points to move forward. At the same time though, there are so many smaller and more evident changes here as well, and that's why I thought we should start with the most exciting parts first, the faction selection and development system. Every strategy game will have you select a faction as the first thing you do. In Total War, you're obviously going to choose Rome or the Eastern Roman Empire, even though you have like 20 other choices. In Europa Universalis 4, you can choose to play any of the several hundred or thousands of nations present in the game, and in Civilization, you choose a culture as well, led by a specific national leader. But even though you sometimes can change nations by forming new ones, especially is this the case in Paradox games, you are generally meant to stay the same faction. Rome always remains Rome in Rome Total War, and Salah ad-Din will remain your leader in Civilization. So then, what exactly does Humankind do to mix things up? Well, it does something I've never seen the likes of before, and doesn't force you to begin as anything. That's right, you don't get to pick your faction right away. Instead, we begin in the Neolithic era, a period in human history without any actual civilizations or complex cultures. In these early stages, you gather food and basically just do what you can to explore the surrounding area. Thing is though, Humankind requires that you collect enough era stars to be able to move forward. Certain actions will grant you era stars, like gathering enough food, making a certain amount of money, winning a specific number of battles, or building enough districts. But before long, you will reach enough stars to finally be able to pick a culture of your own, and this is when the game truly begins. Now, finally, a vast number of choices opens up to you, and we get to pick a culture. The first thing that came to my mind when seeing this is just how beautiful the artwork is. I love the passion that has gone into creating every single illustration, and it really makes it even that much harder to choose a faction because they all look so darn cool. But looking cool is not where it stops. You see, every faction comes with certain special modifiers, meaning that you really should familiarize yourself with the strengths of each culture before you choose. This means that you can develop or adapt your playstyle to that culture, so I'd say keep that in mind. For example, if you want a trade empire, pick the Phoenicians. If you want a vast empire of grand buildings, maybe choose the Egyptians. Or what about the Assyrians, the Zhou, the Babylonians, or maybe the Mycenaeans? Now we've entered the ancient era, and chances are you haven't even met another culture just yet. Now we get unique buildings attributed to that culture, and you get to really see what Humankind has in store for you. Societies formed, and laws will have to be written, religions founded, and economies set in gear. But the fun thing about Humankind is that it doesn't even stop there. The thing about Humankind, the real thing about Humankind, is that cultures actually develop. And the reason for this is that every era has you achieve various projects tied to earning era stars, and you do this by, again, building districts, researching technologies, or just develop your nation in different ways. Much like Civilization, Humankind also takes place during certain years and across named time periods, but this doesn't really restrict you, nor do you have to move your culture forward until you're fully ready. But even then, Humankind lets you actually pick a new culture to play as a completely new culture belonging to the specific time period you're moving into. This is such a cool feature because it makes the entire game feel so much more fluid and inspired. Nothing is really ever set in stone because Humankind says, "Here you go, my guy," and actually lets you go from playing as the Phoenicians to the Romans, as Romans to the Byzantines, and from the Byzantines to its arch nemesis, the Venetians. Or what about the period after? Humankind goes even longer into the space age, and the technology tree gives you a brief glimpse into just how much choice and diversity in eras this game offers. Now, every culture comes with its own architectural style, so whenever you choose a new one, you'll get a fun little video showing you how your cities are changing because of your actions. I love this so much, but what I do have to say is that I just really wish my main government building would change as well, or that I would be able to build a new one. It's just kind of weird having the oldest castle continue to be the center of the city when I've changed cultures, you know? Especially when building new cities, as that culture changes the main building there. So it just kind of feels like they should have taken that extra step, at least making it optional. But hey, what's more is that every culture also comes with their own exclusive building districts and units, which is what really lets you set your culture and cities apart from the rest. Not only in terms of mechanics from gameplay, but also in the all-important visual, vibes, and immersion department. This means that Romans can build grand triumphs that will stand the test of time, while the Venetians can erect, trade boutiques. The fact that we can change cultures like this really does a lot to create a sense of continuation, because we, the player, are actually given the choice to become what we want, who we want, even to remain the same culture forever should we choose, and because what we have built before remains throughout the ages. Humankind therefore allows us to create a legacy, even though you might end up as a completely different culture than the one you began as. It's a fantastic mechanic, and honestly might just be Humankind's biggest selling point. Now onto the second biggest thing about Humankind, which I honestly feel makes a massive difference despite seeming familiar: the campaign map. Many, including myself, partially disliked Civilization VI's map for being too cartoony, overly stylized, and perhaps even a bit childish looking. Turning to Humankind's map then, we see that it too has opted for a colorful and animation-like map. But there are differences here, and they actually change a lot of things, to the point where I've come to love this map. For one, Humankind's landscapes appear grand and vast. There's ample room for both cities to grow and armies to move, and it never seems like you're as forced into tight spaces or limited room as in Civilization. The oceans are vast as well, and since there are so many treasures and anomalies to find, exploring with ships once you acquire the good ones is actually a really fun endeavor. Humankind's map is beautiful, detailed, and with many different biomes, which elegantly transforms into one another over time, meaning that there's never any sharp or weird transitions. I especially love how the cities seem to sprawl and just spread out, and in my view, they look a lot more organic and realistic than in Civilization. As we've seen elsewhere, both strategic and luxury resources are scattered across the map, and they're both very important to own if you're going for a certain playstyle or wanting certain powerful soldiers later on. In addition, the terrain will be more or less fertile depending on where you are, and placing certain buildings close to other buildings of the same type or on certain patches of land will grant you bonus income of whatever resource you're farming. And speaking of buildings, Humankind has a lot of them. Like a lot. Just like with cultures, the artwork of each building is unique and beautiful. Just, again, so darn immersive. The building types of Humankind are essentially split in three. We have buildings, which are the most common ones, which affect certain provinces, and that you can only really build once in each province. Then we have districts, which are specialized buildings dedicated to, among other things, growing food, making money, conducting research, or providing industrial power. After that, we have kind of continuous events, which allows you to, for example, hold feasts or parades which can make your population more stable. Lastly, we have cultural wonders, the largest and most powerful buildings of all. And I think the word wonder kinda gave that away. Wonders though are few and far between, and it's essentially a race to get to build them, much like in Civilization. Wonders may be placed anywhere within your realm, but can never be moved once placed though, so keep that in mind. Much like unique faction districts, wonders stand the test of time, always remaining in place as you play and change cultures. Like in Civilization, you essentially race to get to build them. But instead of being limited by research, wonders only become available to you once you have reached the appropriate time period of that wonder, which allows you to choose between one of several. Thing is, wonders require influence points, which is perhaps the most important resource in the game. But here's the kicker. As long as you've chosen a wonder, spent influence points to build it, and have actually finished its construction, you're allowed to pick another from the same era, provided other factions haven't picked the selection clean already. This is really cool, and it becomes even more awesome when you realize that you can combine the workforce of your cities to work on the same project, meaning that you can severely cut down the time spent on a certain building as long as you're willing to set local construction on hold, of course. Wonders are phenomenally beautiful, both the artwork and the models, and while I do really appreciate the way districts appear, I'm sadly kinda disappointed that the normal buildings, the ones that belong to the city center, are virtually invisible. When I build an aqueduct, I want to see it stretch across my whole damn city, and the same goes for everything else here. That's a big no-no when that doesn't happen, and I don't really understand why all of these beautiful artworks are without actual tangible building models on the map itself. Luckily though, we do have some moving people walking around, which is very nice to see. But what about society itself? After all, we do live in a society, right? Well, Humankind takes advantage of many of the lessons learned from Civilization, but goes about most of them with a certain twist. In societal development, influence points and other developments allow you to enact laws which take your society in the direction you want. Thing is, Humankind allows you to move your culture in varying directions depending on the situation. This means that laws will allow you to become more or less authoritarian, open or closed, progressive or traditional, and I really like that random events occur which also affect your nation and where your choices actually have consequences on your society. Again, influence points are important here. These points determine whether you can enact new laws, whether you can build new wonders, whether you can ascend into a new culture and time period, and whether you can found new cities. And this last point is especially cool, I think, because in Humankind, any military unit, which by the way are the only units in the game, may found outposts, which can later turn into cities. This makes empire building so much more flexible than before, as you're no longer restricted to having settlers run around for you. You never actually even have to make cities out of your outposts. Instead, these outposts may serve as markings of your territory, or, and this is cool, you can link the outpost to a larger city, allowing you to use the main city to actually develop the new and uncivilized territory. Lastly, combat has been majorly overhauled. Yes, you still have to move massive people across the lands, but from the get-go, you're actually able to merge them and make armies. And instead of having soldiers hit one another and having to wait a whole nother turn, battles are actually tactical now, allowing several armies to take part in the same battle. Each battle can even last over several turns, and even though they're not as cinematic as in the Total War series, but let's be honest, what is? They're at least a lot more complex than in Civilization. And if you're not in the mood to fight everything yourself, you can always auto-resolve them. Humankind might look like Civilization on the surface, but underneath lies a game which might have been Civilization made in a parallel universe. Actually, we don't even need to go that much deeper before we see the changes, to be honest. Right from the get-go, Humankind is bigger, vaster, more detailed, and dares to play with scale, demanding that you explore and build your cities to the very brink. It's beautiful and fun, and just feels so much better than doing the same in Civilization. And when it comes to society, I absolutely love the approach to faction building and choice, and the cultural options and developments are so exciting and fresh that I'm almost stunned nobody seems to have thought of this before. It really is elegantly done, and the artwork, which is found all around the game, is so beautifully crafted that it creates a UI which is just fun to experience and explore. Where I think Humankind could have done more though, is in diplomacy. Thing is, diplomacy has just never really been the strong suit of 4X games like this, but at least Humankind does something to innovate. Your options are, for example, expanded when you're allied with a nation, allowing you to have things like customs unions when your relation becomes especially close. But I do wish trade was deeper. I wish war resolution was better and more left up to the player rather than forcing you to end the war when the enemy's war support has reached the bottom. And I wish regular buildings had a much more prominent role in your city, like actually being visible. Other than that though, Humankind is a very, very strong start for this new series, set to a beautiful soundtrack which changes and adapts with your time period and choice of culture. If you've been waiting for a game like Civilization, but one which takes itself more seriously and innovates where Civilization has stagnated, then Humankind just might be the game you've been looking for. And that was Humankind, one of the most anticipated new strategy games of 2021, might I add. In a few months we get Age of Empires 4, and at some point, I guess we're also getting Total War Warhammer 3. But until then, I think Humankind will demand a lot of your time. Thank you so much for watching, friends. If you enjoyed the video, I hope you leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, and support the channel on Patreon. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!